Hey, what is up, Chargers fans? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven. I am your host, and joining me today is a very special guest who has joined us before, Mr. Nick Cothrel of Charger Report for Sports Illustrated. Nick, thanks for taking the time to join me today. How are you doing?
Doing good. Back from Vegas from the draft over 3 days that were pretty exciting, and I was ready to get into the picks and take a look at this draft class.
Yeah, man, a lot of exciting stuff. Obviously, we got to run into each other in Vegas.
Yeah,
What was kind of had you been to the draft before, or was this your first time as well?
that was my first time covering the draft as well. Yeah, first time being there on site, so I didn't really know what to expect either. But checking everything out from where they had the media set up, and then going through like the fan experience stuff and the draft stage. It was hot, but I thought it was a really cool setup, and I thought the NFL did a good job just kind of catering to everybody. They had players from all different teams, and I thought it was a cool setup.
Yeah, I was in shorts and a jersey, and I was hot. This guy over here was in some nice shoes, some pants, and a nice shirt. So, I can imagine it would be pretty hot there. But yeah, obviously, we have a lot to talk about, and we'll dive into some of it. Um, I was talking with one of my friends yesterday, and he was asking me like, "Oh, like, what'd you make of the 17th selection? Like, did you think that it was going to be your guy Zion?" And honestly, like, I was so nervous for that pick because I was like, "Oh, it could be McDuffie, it could be Trevor Penning, Jermaine Johnson was still on the board, and I would have understood that." So, what'd you make of the Chargers taking Zion over guys that maybe more premium positions that were also equally as good prospects, maybe?
Yeah, in my final mock, I had the Chargers taking Trevor Penning, and where I was kind of settled in on was I thought they were either going to go Penning, Zion Johnson, or Trent McDuffie. And I was, while I still was like Penning was the guy I had them taking, I was starting to really kind of buy in onto the Trent McDuffie hype. Um, Now with all those guys sitting there, obviously Zion Johnson was their guy. I think the pick's great, right? They get the best guard in the draft. According to most people, kind of the consensus number one guard. Surely there's a case to be made, for Green out of Texas A&M. But instead of getting like Penning the fourth best tackle, they get Johnson, who's just going to be a plug and play guard. And if who knows, maybe he's going to go on and have a season like Slater had last year. But I think it's a good pick. Like it's tough to say like, oh, it's a safe pick because like what really is a safe pick anymore.
Yeah.
But like at the same time, like Johnson just feels like that type of prospect where like you kind of feel like you know what you're gonna get. And he also offers position versatility. I know they said that he's gonna be a guard, but like who knows? Maybe long term, like they kick him out to tackle. He's played tackle before, so he's also not, just pigeoned into one position either. So that's always a plus. And he only allowed one sack over the last 2 years at Boston College. So
Yeah.
um, there's a elite production there as well.
Yeah, I think it really kind of fits the Chargers profile over the last, year or so in terms of upgrading the offensive line, where you're looking at a prospect or a player with very low pressure numbers and a high pass blocking efficiency rating, which is definitely the case there. And you mentioned the positional flexibility. A lot of the guys think that his best position might actually be center. Jim Nagy and Ben
Yeah.
Fennell in particular have had a bunch of conversations. Brandon Thorne as well about potentially putting him at center just because of how smart he is. And, in a world where the Chargers are playing, without Corey Linsley down the road, I think that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, and I believe at the Senior Bowl, teams are actually asking to see him play some center, and believe he did that there. So, he kind of checked the box for almost every position along the offensive line. So having that position versatility, it's probably even made him more intriguing, I would assume. And but yeah, I really I don't think they really could have gone wrong with either of those three players. And it seems like Johnson was kind of the guy that they were targeting all along, and they didn't have to trade up. I mean, that would have been pretty difficult without a second, but they were able
Yeah.
to just sit there and get him. So we'll see how it pans out.
Yeah. A lot of people still kind of talking about like, oh, they could have traded down. I think after Kenyon Green went 15, I think that trade down possibility kind of went off the board. So I want to get your thoughts here because I think for me, the surprise of the draft was the way that the Chargers played the board in terms of the cornerback position, electing not to take anybody until the 6th and 7th round when they took Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard out of Wake Forest and Ole Miss, respectively. So, there was all this talk, right, about cornerback at 17. And so we kind of figured, okay, they take the guard in the 1st round, they'll take a corner in the 3rd round, maybe the 4th round. They wait, and it kind of seems like they took some long-term projects there. Obviously, today they signed Bryce Callahan. So, what'd you make of the Chargers' decision to wait on corner as long as they did?
Yeah, that was a surprise. Not taking a corner early and not taking a wide receiver at all were two things that just were pretty shocking to me.
Yeah,
Both, like you said, both those corners are more of probably projects long term, probably guys that are gonna contribute on special teams in year one, and then hopefully groom into something down the road. But who knows? Maybe they kind of had something already in the works on with a fallback plan on Bryce Callahan. Had some of their corners that they were hoping to get, and maybe even day two, maybe there were certain guys they were trying to target there that just weren't sitting there for them to grab. So they just continue to hold off until day three. But yeah, I mean they have starting caliber corners, right? Like they
yeah,
have some nice guys. Obviously, J.C. Jackson, one of the best corners in the league. But Brandon Staley's made an emphasis to upgrade that secondary, and so getting JT Woods, yeah, he's more of a safeties than he is a corner, but I could see him, kind of being that chess piece to match up against tight ends, or you know, I don't know. I'd have to do a little more digging in, but I don't know if he can kind of contribute in the slot at all. But very fast. I mean, 4.36 40-yard dash. So I mean, that really jumps out and what they're able to do. So um, but yeah, I mean, we'll see in terms of those day three cornerback prospects, as well as Callahan, who can offer some stuff in the slot, and he's played in Staley's defense before, so there's going to be some familiarity there.
yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the reason why, people, including myself, wanted them potentially to draft Trent McDuffie was just to have that kind of flexibility. You have four reliable corners, you can
Yeah.
move them around, and then you could see what you have in Mark Webb next year, of course, with Derwin James and Nasir Adderley. Now they get JT Woods in the 3rd round, and they signed Bryce Callahan. So I think you're just feeling much better about the secondary depth if anything kind of happens to the starters with players like Callahan and JT Woods who can contribute right away, not necessarily be relied upon to be, heavy minutes guys unless again an injury happens, but you feel confident in their ability to contribute right away.
Yeah, the depth now versus just 5 days ago seems
Yeah.
exponentially better, right? Like, I'm sure every Charger fan is definitely feels much better about that now, because Woods and Callahan, both those guys, while they're probably going to be more of depth guys, like again, I have to do a little more digging into JT Woods, but I feel like if they need to be like spot starters, like those aren't the worst guys to have on
Yeah.
your roster to kind of fill in that role.
Yeah, I know you obviously were covering the Rams last year, but there were so many games last season when, a player like Trey Marshall that they had to sign off the street, or Alohi Gilman, who I think is a good box player, but he's very limited athletically. And there were so many times last year when those two guys were kind of left on an island in the back while they're trying to do all these versatile things with Derwin James and Nasir Adderley, and they just can't make a play. They're just not physically capable of making
Mhm.
a play, and so now you get JT Woods and his, 9 interceptions over the last 2 years. I think he had an additional like 6 pass breakups or something like that.
Yeah.
And his 4.3 speed that you mentioned. And you feel more comfortable there. And I think that really was kind of the emphasis in getting a player like JT Woods. And, there were a lot of people talking about it being a reach, but there was quite a run on safeties and then quite a fault off on the safety class. So, the more that I've had to sit on the JT Woods pick, the bigger fan of it I have become. So I'm excited to see really all the moving parts now that you had Bryce Callahan into this secondary.
Yeah, and I mean with Woods, like it seems like the theme with pretty much the three guys that they've added in the draft to their secondary was they can all fly. They're all super fast, and like you just mentioned, like the ball skills of JT Woods. He's bringing down 8, 9 picks over the last 2 years. Seems like kind of his Achilles heel is more of being like kind of like a sure tackler. But if they use him in the deep part of the field, to kind of protect, be that extra layer on the back end, and who knows, maybe he's going to come down with a couple picks.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll shift gears a little bit here. I think a lot of us had kind of penciled in edge rusher as a potential need for the Chargers. Of course, they do not decide to draft anyone. Again, a very surprising move to say the least. Is should that be a concern for people, or are people like me kind of overblowing it because they have Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack?
I wrote an article the other day talking about how I was pretty surprised that they didn't address that on day 3 of the draft. And like, sure, you're not exactly going to get just an impact player at edge, probably on in the 4th, 5th, 6th round. Um, but who knows? Maybe you do end up finding a hidden gem. I mean, Max Crosby was he's in the AFC
Yeah,
West. He was taken on day 3, and look what he's turned into. But Khalil Mack's coming off the season where he was just injured, and I know there's a lot of optimism with him, and rightfully so. He's a great player, but like while he's been in Chicago, there have been injury concerns. So not having a third guy, a rotational pass rusher, or even just to give you know Joey and Khalil a breather, like you got like Chris Rump and stuff, but at the same time, like nobody sitting back there has really delivered production kind of like consistently, or has really proven themselves. So I was pretty shocked by that. I've briefly kind of looked into which edge rushers are still out there. There's quite a few veterans that are kind of starting to trickle on the downside of their career. Who knows? Maybe they're willing to take less to join a team like the Chargers, who look like they're trying to make a run. I know like Carlos Dunlap's out there. What's his face? Benson Mayoa. Like there's some guys who maybe they look back into free agency and see if those guys are willing to kind of take a relatively cheap deal on a 1 year contract.
yeah, and I know that there's a lot of optimism on Charger social media about Chris Rumph. I just don't think that's a super smart idea to bank on that kind of jump because he was, there were barely any flashes last year, and so now you're asking a guy to be that spot starter potentially, or fill in and give those guys a break. And I think he can certainly be a quality 4th edge rusher this year, but they need like a legitimate quality backup, and they just don't really have that right now.
Yeah, or even just bring in a guy that's, let's just say, is like pretty comparable to him, and let him duel it out in training camp, and see who kind of earns that number 3 spot. Because
Yeah,
I just don't think like a player like him just deserves to just take that number 3 role, because you're one injury away before he has to start every game.
yeah,
So I do think that that's probably an area that they're going to upgrade to some extent before they head into camp.
yeah. Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about what the Chargers have done, of course, in the first 2 rounds, kind of what they haven't done.
Mm.
What pick from day 3 kind of stands out to you as somebody that really caught your attention, whether it be the selection or, of course, you guys been doing the press conferences. Who stands out to you among those day 3 guys?
Well, I loved the Isaiah Spiller pick, because I kept saying like they got to get another running back in there that's going to kind of ease the load a little bit off of Eckler, because
Right.
he was great last year, but it's just not as sustainable to just expect him to just produce like 20 touchdown seasons year in and year
Yeah.
out and stay healthy, and for a playoff run. So getting a guy like Spiller, who I think he can really pack a punch, and he's been a bell cow back at Texas A&M. So um, you both in the run game and the pass game, he really kind of does it all. I was shocked that he even lasted to the 4th round, because I remember even before last college football season, like people were saying like he's like a fringe like 2nd round back. So to get him there, and he was just as productive last season, I think was a home run pick for the Chargers. And another thing that really shocked me was when they ended up taking Xander Huff
Horvath, I think it is. Yeah.
Horvath. Thank you. I'll get these names eventually. But yeah, taking a fullback with the final pick there definitely was a surpriser. Don't think anybody had a mock draft with the Chargers taking a fullback. Um, but he's super athletic from what I've seen. Like he's more than just a traditional blocking style fullback. Like he can go out and catch some passes and pick up some short yardage situations. But I thought that was a spot where they're just going to take one of these wide receivers that can just fly down the field and just kind of add that speed dimension. But yeah, I really like the Spiller pick, and that seventh rounder definitely caught me by surprise.
Yeah, both of those seventh rounders definitely caught me by surprise. I was like, Dean Leonard, who is that? Xander Horvath, I think, is a really interesting pick because the Chargers didn't really use. I mean, Steven Anderson was kind of their fullback, but he was more of a hybrid tight end fullback player.
Yeah.
And so, like, I had them taking like a late round tight end flyer on somebody and just saying like, okay, like this is your Anderson replacement, and then instead they
Hmm.
just opted for the straight up fullback. So that definitely raised my eyebrow a little bit. I was like, a fullback in round 7, like you don't really see that whole that very often. Of course, Connor Hayward from Michigan State did go earlier too, but that was definitely very interesting.
Yeah, and like Connor Hayward, he's another guy. Like both of these fullbacks are guys that like pass catching style of fullbacks. So maybe the Chargers just see more in Xander than kind of how he was used at Purdue. And most teams don't really expect the fullbacks to kind of be the missing ingredients on sneak out or whatever on some
Yeah,
of these short yardage. So we'll see kind of how they deploy him and how he's utilized.
yeah. I think a lot of people were a little underwhelmed by Gabe Neighbors last year. He didn't play a whole lot. He was always like a healthy scratch, but last year was difficult because they were wasting a roster spot essentially there because they carried 4 tight ends and Neighbors the fullback, and so
Yeah.
one of those guys was always inactive on game day, and you're just like you could use that spot on an extra defensive lineman, on an extra receiver, on something useful as opposed to a fullback or tight end that's always inactive. So hopefully Xander can be a bit of a boost and allow them to free up an extra roster spot.
You have to think like maybe there's a chance that now that roster spot is used in the secondary because now it just they just have so many pieces back
Yeah,
there now. And with the AFC West and how pass heavy it is, it's not the worst thing in the world to carry an extra defensive back and kind of go safeties and cornerbacks heavy in some of these personnel packages to stop the pass. So
yeah, it is going to be interesting. I know Brandon Staley said on Saturday that they were excited about bringing Tavon Campbell back, and they hold Keemon Hall in kind of high regard. And so then I was like, okay, so that's why they waited so long, and then they signed Bryce Callahan. So very interesting dynamic that's going to unfold there in training camp for sure.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see who secures the 4 and 5 spots and kind of how the cookie crumbles because there's going to be a lot of guys in there, and I mean it should really be a competitive battle in training camp, and I mean that's really what you want for all these depth positions because just handing a guy a spot, that's where I think you can get kind of
Yeah.
concerned like if one injury away and your quote unquote depth guy is now your starter. So having multiple guys in there that are just hungry to kind of secure that next spot in line, I think is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely. I think overall, I don't know how you kind of feel, but I like the way that they kind of fortified the interior depth specifically. It's kind of like my favorite thing that they did this year. Getting Zion Johnson, getting Jamari Salyer, and then adding Tito Ogbonia to the defensive line group is definitely my favorite part of this draft. But I don't know if you have anything that really kind of stands out as your favorite thing from the weekend.
Yeah, he's interesting because like he has a background. He first of all like he played a ton of football at UCLA. Like I believe he was starting games since he was a freshman. So like I want to say he started like 40 plus games there and has a background in shot put. He's also has a background as a power lifter. The UCLA publisher at SI was sharing with me that he he benches like 440 and squats like 680 and
Dang.
like he had the most reps on the bench press at the NFL combine for the defensive lineman. So like just another big body in there stuff the run. And I mean that's just been the theme of the offseason for that position. All the guys that they've signed with Joseph Day and Johnson, bringing back Covington, and now adding him to the mix. It's for a position that started the offseason as probably like their biggest weakness. It's now depth wise now looks like one of the deeper positions.
Yeah, absolutely agree there. Really excited to see how that one pans out as well. Well, Nick, this has been great, man. I kept you a little longer than I said I would. What do you have coming up down the road, and where can Chargers fans find your work if they want to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Nick Cothrel, Nickcothrel, and all my work's on Charger Report, part of SI. And just throughout the week, we're going to be, you know, putting together some draft coverage. There's going to be, some media availabilities periodically over the next couple weeks, and then, soon we'll roll into Ricky minicamp and OTAs and all that good stuff.
Yeah, man. So really appreciate all your work there. Excited to hear kind of, your input in those press conferences is very valuable to all of us. So appreciate it. Keep it the good work. And Chargers fans, make sure and give him a follow. Check out his work on SI. And as always, we'll talk to you later. Thanks again, Nick.
Thanks, Steven. Thanks.